Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Faces of Carlsbad, Channel 23's wonderful program, we hope, that you will enjoy, sponsored by Intrepid Potash. And today we're at the Permian Basin Regional Training Center in Carlsbad, New Mexico, and I'm overwhelmed by looking around this place. We were here a while back and visiting with a very lovely lady, and today I've got a friend of mine, Joel Arnwine, and Joel, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you, Bob. It's good to be here.
Seems the only time I see you, though, is when there's a tragedy in the air, like a tornado, possible tornado, or a bad storm. But anyway, it's great to see you. Fill us in a little bit with your background, where you were born, and where you grew up, and some of your background that people would like to know more about Joel Arnwine.
Well, I spent most of my life growing up in Albuquerque. I was actually born in El Paso, in this part of the country, but moved away to Albuquerque when I was about in the third grade. I spent a little bit of time in Lubbock, and but did most of my growing up in Albuquerque. I spent my teen years there, some of my early college career there. I moved off to Dallas for a little while, and wound up marrying a girl from Carlsbad and coming back here back in 1992. At that time I had an interest in public safety and an interest in serving the public and working with people, and spent about 5 or so years trying to get a job with the Carlsbad Police Department. I started out in a manufacturing company, working as a quality assurance technician in a manufacturing company here in Carlsbad. Spent some time as a reserve sheriff's deputy with the Sheriff's Department, spent some time as a reserve police officer with the Carlsbad Police Department. Finally got a job with the Carlsbad Police Department, and unfortunately got hurt and had to spend a little bit of time in rehabilitation. While I was in rehabilitation, I spent some time in dispatch, and when I was unable to go back to being a police officer, I stayed in dispatch for about 5 years. While I was in dispatch, I developed a training program for communications officers at the Carlsbad Police Department, used for a number of years. I also became an emergency medical dispatcher and an emergency medical dispatch instructor while at the Carlsbad Police Department. I also got interested then in emergency medicine and in the fire service, so I started working towards making my career maybe move towards the fire department, becoming not only an EMT basic as required to be an instructor in emergency medical dispatch, but also in becoming an emergency medical technician intermediate and also an EMT paramedic. And in that time, I was at the Carlsbad Police Department, got all of that training, and also started working on a bachelor's degree while I was at the Carlsbad Police Department. And in my tenure at the Carlsbad Police Department, I never had the opportunity to go to the fire department, but I decided, since I was finishing up a bachelor's in business administration, that I probably should find out what it was like to sit through a management interview, and an opportunity came up with Eddy County to apply for the job of emergency manager, which is also a public safety kind of job, and piqued my interest. So I applied for the job, had the opportunity to interview, and fortunately had the opportunity to be hired by Eddy County back in 2001 as their emergency manager. And I've been the emergency manager here in Eddy County since then.
9 years now you've been in the emergency. I remember you mentioned the emergency warning system, and you get this originally from Midland, Texas. Is that where the main one is? And then you call into them telling what's happening in this area? Or?
There's a number of systems that we use. Well, one of the systems is the emergency alert or emergency broadcast system, and it's actually grown now to where that system works not just from the National Weather Service, but we actually have systems in place that we can activate locally. They're also tied to the National Weather Service systems, so that those systems will set off our alerting systems as well. So we have a number of ways that we can alert and notify the citizens of Eddy County, both the citizens of Artesia, Carlsbad, Loving, the Village of Hope, folks that live in the unincorporated areas of Eddy County. We have the system that you mentioned, the emergency alert, emergency broadcast system, which is a good system because you can go to Radio Shack or one of those kinds of stores and purchase a small receiver that will actually receive those alerts inside your house. We have sirens up in Artesia that will alert folks who are outside their homes. Radio stations are all required to broadcast those messages. We also have a system that we can use called the reverse 911 system, and it's actually a system we used not very long ago when there was a 911 outage, both in Carlsbad, Artesia, and most of Eddy County was without 911 service.
Oh, what caused that?
Well, there was a cut in a fiber line, and that fiber line didn't have a self-healing loop in it at the time. Now they have assured us that they have a self-healing loop now in that system, and that shouldn't happen again. In fact, we found out recently that there was a similar kind of outage in Alamogordo just a couple of months ago, and there was nobody realized the outage because of the changes that they've made in the system at the telephone company. But this reverse 911 system will, we can take any shape on a map, we can put that shape on the map and tell the system to call all of those people and send whatever message we need to send. In this case, we sent a message that said, there's no 911 service in Eddy County at this time. If you have an emergency, please call this 7-digit number. And then when the 911 service was restored later that evening, we sent another message out that said, the 911 service has been restored and you can now begin to call 911 again. So that's another system that we have. If it's severe weather, if it's a chemical release, if there's a law enforcement issue where maybe there's a hostage in your neighborhood and you can stay inside, any kind of threat. We've used it before for power outages. When we thought power outages were going to be long-term, we notified the affected residents of the power outage. So that's one of the systems that we can use to notify local folks as well. We also use our website, www.eddyoem.com, and that website, we have the ability to post emergency information during an event or an emergency. We can put up specific information about that emergency so folks can get really good information from our website as well.
Well, what was the one thing, Joel, that tipped you to the point where you got so interested in this? Because it seems like a fabulous widespread job, but what was the one thing that got you interested in this type of business?
Well, I would say that my experiences in public safety probably led me down a path to want to help people, and I want to make sure that the community that I live in and the community that you live in is a community that's prepared. If we have a well blowout, if we have a flood, if we have some kind of collapse, some kind of crater, those kinds of things, I wanted to make sure that people were safe and people were sound. And so when this opportunity came up, that was the one thing that I focused on, is having the ability to make people have the opportunity to prepare for themselves, their homes and their families, so that if there was a need to evacuate, if there was a need to shelter in place, that folks could do that, and that we could provide them from our office the tools to do that.
Yeah. Now this area has been pretty lucky, fortunate through the years, it hasn't it?
It has been. We had, in 2004, a president who declared flood disaster that actually extended through portions of the state, but included Eddy County. Also in 2004, we had a well blowout that required us to evacuate about 1,600 residents for about 4 days in our community. But other than that, we have been relatively fortunate. We've had some small incidents take place. We've done some small evacuations. But we always have threats, and those threats are the things that keep us in our office on our toes, watching what's going on, making sure that folks are prepared, sending out messages, sharing messages with the public so that they have the tools that they can prepare themselves with. One of those tools that we have is also at our website at www.eddyoem.com/plan, and at that website there is all the tools that you need to make a plan, to prepare a go kit, to be prepared in severe weather, in high wind events and power outages, just a number of different emergencies that you might need to prepare your family for. There's information at that website that will help you prepare your family either to stay or go, information about what kinds of disasters or emergencies may cause you to stay or go. So that's a good place to get information there at our website.
Now, for a person who doesn't get involved in websites and all they have at home is maybe a radio or a television set, they're at risk though if they're not tuned into anything, aren't they?
There could be some risk. We have a couple of other things that we can do. We have access to a cable override system, and that cable override system allows us to send emergency broadcast messages over the cable network. It goes over this channel. And if there are emergencies that we need to get the word out, we can do it that way. We also, oftentimes, if we have to evacuate folks, actually go door to door and knock on doors and let people know that there's an evacuation in progress.
So on channel 23, if you suddenly see the show that you're watching blanked out or the noise at the bottom coming on with the message, you better pay attention to it.
That's right, because we actually have the ability to dial in and override the cable system and send out that emergency message. Generally don't do it unless there is a true emergency. We test it very, very rarely. So if there is the opportunity that we override the cable system, it's pretty clear.
Well, Joel, do all the messages come from this magnificent area down here where I'm sitting today?
The messages can come from anywhere. On the cable system, it's actually just a telephone call that we make. Our emergency broadcast and emergency alert systems are all computer web-based, so we can actually access those systems from anywhere that we have access to the internet.
I see. So anyway, I'm sitting at home reading a good book and listening to, having the television on, not paying attention to the show, but I hear this strange sound. That means I better pay attention because Joel has something on there that needs to be heeded to, right?
That's right.
Well, let's suppose it's 2 o'clock in the morning, Joel. You're sound asleep after a very busy day here at the training center. Who calls you?
Well, the 24-hour people that we work with, primarily law enforcement, fire service, and dispatch organizations, have a direct line to me. And as soon as they know that something's going on, they'll make a phone call and notify me of what's going on. Then I take a look at it. Our office stays in the 24-hour monitoring status, so we look at what the threats are. We have access to a number of tools. If it's weather related, we have direct access to our partners at the Midland National Weather Service. If it's other kinds of incidents, sometimes we have to get up out of bed and go take a look for ourselves and see what's going on. But that's all part of what we do to keep the public of Eddy County safe.
Does it take a toll on you sometimes with being exhausted? Well, don't answer that. We'll go to a break and we'll come right back, ladies and gentlemen.
This program is brought to you by Intrepid Potash. Intrepid Potash, investing in the future to help us grow.
Well, good day again. We're back with my very close friend, Joel Arnwine. And Joel, I had just asked you, by the way, this is Channel 23, don't forget that, and we are sponsored by Intrepid Potash. But anyway, getting back to this question I was asking, do you ever have difficulty sleeping at night?
Well, I get interrupted sleep every so often. You know, one of the good things is we don't have a lot of disasters and emergencies that arise in Eddy County, so it doesn't always, they don't wake me up every night, but I do have the occasion that I have to rise in the night to go take care of things.
Now, are you in this building or in this area usually 5 days a week, 6 days a week?
Well, we actually use this building just for specific training. You know, there's a lot of things that occur that one person can't take care of.
Yeah.
So we use this facility on a regular basis to train our volunteer fire staff, to train some of the department heads within the cities and the counties on emergency operations and how those operations work. We just started a program in the last few months that we're calling EOC Lunch and Learn, Emergency Operations Center Lunch and Learn, because I have a pretty good understanding of how an emergency operations center runs. But the staff within the county, the staff within the cities don't have to staff an EOC very often because we don't have many of those emergencies. But for them to be able to staff an emergency and support the responders during an emergency takes a little bit of training. So about once a month we get together for a couple of hours a day. We eat lunch together and I share some training information with those folks. Today, for example, we did an exercise here as if we activated an emergency operations center in response to some severe weather. And then there was also an exercise testing some of our plans to respond to a brine well collapse. And we had about 25 people in the Emergency Operations Center that were working together to solve resource needs, to find people to fill positions, to make sure that traffic routes were taken care of, to make sure that roads were blocked, to make sure that shelters were set up. As the scenario went, there was a bad winter storm with lots of ice and those kinds of things that caused folks to be displaced from their house because there was no electricity and that kind of thing. So the teams had to work together to find the resources and to find the shelters and to get the things set up. So we did that exercise today based on the Lunch and Learn. We use this facility because it's a great facility that provides the kind of space and the kind of infrastructure that we need, network and telephone infrastructure, a lot of space that we can spread out in, tables and chairs, good room for people to get into. So this facility provided that for us. We're also, for our volunteer fire departments, supporting a couple of hazardous materials classes. A couple tonight, we'll do one on Saturday, we'll come back in October and do another 2-day class, all paid for out of State Homeland Security grant funding that provides support and assistance to our first responders in Eddy County.
So when you first started talking to me about this, my ear heard launch and learn, but it was actually lunch and learn,
Lunch
right?
and learn, yes sir.
We're going to eat and then we're going to learn.
Yes sir.
And that's fantastic. And you had a large group out here today, I noticed.
And we actually had about 35 or 40 people that it took to conduct the exercise. We actually had a group of role players down the hall in another room that were placing phone calls into the Emergency Operations Center, so that the Emergency Operations Center had tasks that they had to take care of, resources that they had to go find, and they made calls back into the simulation cell so that the play would continue in the Emergency Operations Center, giving people the opportunity to use some of the tools that we have, fill out some of the forms that it takes to get an Emergency Operations Center moving in the direction to find resources and solve resource needs.
Now the other buildings in the area, do they have things in here that you need to be aware of constantly?
The other buildings at the training center, there's a number of buildings that support training firefighters on how to fight fires, and we make that available to our volunteer fire departments. We provide some funding to the PBRTC, and through that funding we actually open up the doors of the training center for our fire departments to come out and use the props and get involved in firefighting activities for training purposes.
See, that has to keep you busy. Now, how many other people besides yourself are here, let's say, every day?
Well, this facility has training going on almost every day of the week. Sometimes night classes like there are this week, sometimes training classes on the weekends. This facility supports a lot of emergency type training, safety training, first aid training, those kinds of things on a daily basis. And I would say there's throughout the week there's hundreds that pass through these doors and use this facility to accomplish the training that it takes to keep the kinds of industries and the kind of safety that we need to provide for our community going.
So other counties would call in and they have to make arrangements to be here, and you're always welcoming people from southwestern, southeastern New Mexico?
That's right. The facilities are second to none in this part of the state. There's not another training facility in New Mexico that matches what's available here for fire departments and first responders. And so we have folks from Albuquerque come in occasionally. We've had folks from Lee County, Chavez County, Otero County come in and take different kinds of trainings that are offered at the training center. So they're regularly out here to learn how to respond to emergencies in their communities as well.
Well, and the training is absolutely overwhelming. I mean, you people do such an outstanding job out here. Do you ever have any, for example, does the governor ever come down and compliment you?
Well, we haven't had any visits from the governor that I'm aware of. I know that the film industry was here looking at some ways that they could participate in making training videos and that kind of thing. So there is certainly some look from the state here, but I'm not sure that the governor's ever been out to visit us.
We're going to have to let the governor who is and the governor to come, we'll have to let them know, I guess.
That's a good thing.
Well, now your training with the police department years ago probably helped you with this communication part, correct?
I have some experience with the communications. I spent some time as a dispatcher at the Carlsbad Police Department, and now I work with the Eddy County Central Communications Authority, who has built a central communications system that dispatches basically all the first responders in Eddy County. The Carlsbad Police and Fire Departments are still dispatched by their police department, but all the other response agencies there in Eddy County are dispatched by the Eddy County Central Communications Authority. And
Is that located in the Fletsy area in Artesia?
The communication center is up in Artesia. It's at a secure location up there.
Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable.
It is, and one of the tools that it took to make that system work was having a communications network that was actually able to work countywide. And, before the communication center was built, I managed a project that the county invested about $10 million in a communication system. We built 5 tower sites. We built a new simulcast network that basically allows our first responders to talk on their emergency communication systems, their radio systems, from anywhere in the county without having to switch from channel to channel or go from zone to zone. They can just put the radios on one channel and they're able to talk to the dispatch center and to each other from one end of the county to the other.
Now, these towers were placed in different parts of the county.
We have 5 towers spread out in strategic locations around the county that provide about 98% mobile radio coverage throughout the county.
And you basically were involved in the building of these towers.
I managed the project kind of from start to finish. We started with the project with a communications engineering study that was done by a contractor who gave us some recommendations on what we should do. We came up with what we thought was the best plan for Eddy County. Then we started having tower systems built. We bought end user communications equipment for all public safety first responders. And we bought that equipment because we wanted them to have the ability to operate with one another, interoperability, which is a big Homeland Security term these days. But what we did was we built a system that we knew that no matter what agency you came from within Eddy County, that you would be able to talk to other agencies without any problem. And that system has been in place now for about 3 years. Every police officer, every fire truck, every public safety responder in Eddy County has a piece of equipment that's exactly the same. They all have access to the simulcast network so we can all talk countywide, and the system has worked flawlessly to provide interoperable communications among our first responders.
Now this Permian, I'll always tongue twist on that one, Permian Basin Regional Training Center opened up officially when? Is it about a year or so ago? When I got it all basically put together?
The Permian Basin Regional Training Center has been in operation for about 3 or 4 years now.
Oh, is that right?
Has functioned providing training for first responders for that period of time. They've had a couple of different executive directors, and they've gone through some changes, but I think that they're on a path to success now.
And for those people who don't know about this, the Permian Basin, why was it given that name?
Well, in this region, the Permian Basin is a salt bed that provides salt for a number of different things, mostly for fertilizer and storage of low-level nuclear waste. But there was a tragedy that took place in the Permian Basin about 10 years ago, and this facility was built on that tragedy, and that tragedy had to do with fire and emergency response.
Yeah.
And so this facility was built on that.
So we've come a long ways in just 10 years.
We really have, and we have an opportunity for our first responders to really have some of the best training that they can get in southeast New Mexico, right here in our back door.
Yeah, and for those around the state and in southwestern Texas, what a wonderful place to come and train. My gosh, I'm overwhelmed with the beauty of this place.
It's a great place to train and learn how to respond to emergencies like the one that created the tragedy that developed this place.
Yeah. Well, Joel, I want to thank you for being our guest today. It's been a real pleasure. And I must say that this work must be agreeing with you, because the more I see you as the years go by, you look younger every year. So you must be living a good life out here.
I certainly hope so. Bob, thanks for the opportunity to share with the folks.
My pleasure. And on behalf of Channel 23 and Intrepid Potash, goodbye and good luck. That was wonderful.
Thanks, Bob.
I really, oh gosh,